Yes, and it is a mighty one indeed, rounding out the weekend in Twickenham, Saturday at 4:45 GMT, England playing host to Ireland in essentially the title eliminator, I guess.
Yes,
before the final round. This one's going to be taken by Matthew Reynal, Mike Adamson can't do too much damage as the AOR, and Pierre Brousset as the other AOR, and Marius Jonker in the TMO box. This is going to be a huge game between two classic rivals who have been going at it since the 19th century, as you say. But it's been it's a phenomenal game, and the stakes couldn't be higher between two class teams. This is perhaps the highlight of the whole weekend, I would think.
I think so. It's always delivers this one, and just for sheer emotional stakes and history, and then quality of rugby as well. This is kind of one of those matchups that is what epitomises what the Six Nations is all about. As you say, England and Ireland have been playing in rugby union internationals against each other since 1875. The first game being won by England in the Oval in London by a score of 2-0 from way back when in the old scoring system. Since then, the two teams have played a total of 138 test matches, with England winning 80, Ireland 50, and 8 of them resulting in a draw. So quite even-numbered matchups there in that regard.
Yeah, a comfortable win for England overall.
Overall, they have held the record for sure. Apart from their annual Six Nations match as well, the teams have also met in 3 World Cup warm-up matches prior to the 2011, 2015 and 2019 World Cups, all of which have been won by England. There was also one one-off match in April 1988 to celebrate the millennium of the city of Dublin, and that was where the kind of perpetual trophy that exists for this matchup arose. It's the Millennium Trophy that's up for grabs when these two clash. It's currently held not
by the millennium that people might think, but no, a different millennium entirely.
Indeed, Dublin's millennium. It's currently held by Ireland, I should say, who did triumph last year in the Aviva Stadium in Dublin at 32-18. That was on the final day of the tournament last year.
That was Ireland righting a wrong that Eddie Jones had the Indian sign over Ireland for a long time after 2018, constantly beating them in 2019 twice, in 2020 twice. And in 2021 Ireland finally managed to right the course under Andy Farrell for the first time. But as we said, this is the game between the only two teams not named France who could yet win the competition, both with 2-1 records so far. The loser of this game going back to an even record, out of contention, while the winner has a chance to bring it to the last weekend with a chance to win the tournament.
That's exactly it. The last 2-1 sides left in the comp going head to head. So there's both of them effectively playing for their tournament campaign lives. So that should add that extra little bit of spark, as if you don't need it, because even when these two sides are out of contention, this matchup tends to be a fiery and feisty one as well, with neither side willing to back down or give an inch. We are going to look at the preview from both sides' point of view. We're going to look at the winning conditions for each of these sides, and we're going to start with the hosts, which is England this time. It is in Twickenham, the home of rugby, as they'd say, but another big test for this relatively young England side, relatively new pack. Obviously brand new 10 that they're very excited about, who has really risen to some of these challenges so far, but it is another test for him, for Marcus Smith. Will they have a very cogent, strong plan? Because that has been a hallmark of Eddie Jones' teams against Ireland, is have a good first quarter plan of action to try and unpick what is a very good Ireland team that'll be rolling into town.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's been interesting to hear all the criticism of England over the past couple of weeks and their offence. If you watch that game back, it wasn't too far away.
No.
They were struggling at times for options, but you could see signs of what it can be. You could see the width that they were trying to create, the speed they were trying to put on the ball.
The willingness of their forwards to interplay and to get their hands free a bit and try and be more proactive in that area.
It's just a question of putting those options together a little more frequently, and then who knows what it could become. Joe Marler, just as far as news from the camp, Joe Marler was talking in the week about an added edge to England training, saying he was afraid to make jokes. I think he was saying he was punched a few times. They're doing their
flog the boys routine,
intense Ireland prep, as they'd put it, and they are saying that they're aware that Ireland are very good and there's been a different edge to camp, and this is a huge game for them.
Sure.
And so they're hoping to deliver what they have done against Ireland in years gone by, which is their most complete performance in the competition.
Yeah, well,
that's what they're hoping to bring out.
The criticism is born of one thing in terms of the media just having a bit too much time on their hands during the gap week as well, and England media tending to be a bit more of a vicious circle of vultures than most. So so there's always a bit of that knives out aspect, but they definitely have a big performance in them, and you can see that it's coming and that they are improving week on week.
There's too much quality on the side.
And there's 2 big games left. There's this one obviously, and then there's Paris the week after, so their heads are very much screwed on and focused on that. And as you say, it's still within their hands. Them and France are the only 2 who can say that it's still within their hands. Ireland need help from either Wales or England themselves to get the tournament win, whereas England, with wins this week and next, can take it all. So yeah, and for all that there's criticism about the young team and that the offense hasn't quite fired, they've still put themselves in a great position with the final 2 weeks to come. So yeah, they should be gleaning confidence from that.
Yeah, no question. They have limited their squad down to 26 players, so we have a fair idea of what they're going to be going with on the game itself, obviously notwithstanding 1 or 2 things. Interestingly,
Cowan Dickey, I believe, was out.
Cowan Dickey's out injured, yes, that's a blow to them, obviously, and you'd imagine Jamie George will start. Blamir will be covering him. They'll likely be sticking to more or less the same system they've had. Ewells will probably lock down with Itoje and Laws at 6. Then you have an interesting discussion in the back row. Underhill was brought in, but then was deemed not to be match ready, and so was brought back out again. Don Brandt has had COVID, but they're saying that he might play. Obviously, Salman Simmons is a fairly straightforward swap if he doesn't. But they have got other guys who are interesting on the fringes. It may be interesting. Alfie Barbieri, who had been in such good form for Wasps, might feature if there is no Don Brandt. He might come in on the bench, or Curry, who went off the last day with a head knock. If he's not right, you could see Barbieri come into the game, either from the bench or from a starting position. That would be interesting to see. But I think the bones of the team will be quite similar. They're talking up their young 9, 10, 15 axis of it looks as though Randall has now unseated Ben Youngs, and Ben Youngs is going to come in off the bench as he did against Wales with Marcus Smith, and then that centre partnership between, there was rumours that Daly was going to be dropped out of the squad. He played quite well against Wales. He's
also played quite well against Leicester at the weekend for Sarries too, so he's in decent form, but
he's attributably hurt by the fact that he's just not that quick. So he's not when you get him 1-on-1 with Gary Ringrose in an offensive set, maybe Marchant has a better chance than Daly, but I imagine he'll be there.
Although they do value, they have a lot of good boots, but Daly's is a serious cannon of a left boot that is useful for things like exit play and stuff, which is always an important factor in these Ireland matchups too. So it remains to be seen what they go with there. Obviously the big news of Manu Tuilagi not being there, that does affect them, because there was that damning stat during that Eddie Jones era that it was like, yes, Eddie Jones's era were dominant over Ireland, but the with Manu versus without Manu stat in
that's
Ireland,
the biggest one.
So that balance in the midfield is something they haven't quite managed to nail down. And that's partly where this criticism of their offence comes, is just that traditionally England do have a hard-nosed, hard-running kind of centre in there, and more recently that has been Tuilagi, who has kind of dominated that position and made it his own, and in his absence they become a little bit more lateral, and their system kind of shifts and changes, and then they're a little bit less penetrative.
And it was interesting actually, just to throw another quote at you, because Noel was talking in front of the media, and he had some interesting things to say about the attack, and he was saying, he admitted that the attack was a work in progress, but he said that the what they're looking at this week is adopting a mindset of being brave. And so here is his quote, because I was thinking that this is such a kick heavy offense and that's worked against Ireland, and it still maybe this could all be mind games, but he's saying, he says, and I quote, a lot of it's about being brave. There have been times in the past with England, and we've all seen it, when we've had chances to go, maybe we've dropped to a kick instead. And he's saying the game changes.
Week 1 against Scotland they were guilty of that a lot.
Indeed, but even just like when you have 2 or 3 on the outside, but the backfield opens up, their instinct tends to be to drop to a kick. But he's saying that you have to give guys like Randall and Marcus a chance to play, use those opportunities to try and stretch defences and keep the ball in hand and go through more phases, and trust their offence to open up the defence. It was interesting to hear from him, and I think from an offensive point of view, it's obviously been the major talking point in the off week, but I think that their attack matches up okay against the Irish defence, looking even at what they did against Wales. Wales being such a well-spread team that was kind of begging to have a hard run Tuilagi come at them. Ireland's defence is toughest on the inside, and if anything is a little narrow, and to be honest, quite a lot narrow.
France have consistently caught them off set piece by going to one side followed by the other side, and then you'll find that all the front rowers are defending in a row
on the wing, exactly. Everything's disoriented if you can tie up Henshaw and Josh, and and Ringrose in one side of the corner, or Aki if it's Aki, then all of a sudden you flash it to the other side, you can get some favourable matchups. And England have been going wide first. Like Ireland at times against Italy were caught narrow when they had a two-man advantage. It was extraordinary, and Italy's offence wasn't bringing much, but you just look up and be like, geez, they have an overlap. How?
Yeah.
And it's because Ireland are trying to bring this pressure defence on the inside, and they are kind of a defence that's built to try and stop what Tuilagi is bringing in some ways, and be that physical entity. But England are not playing that way. They're holding their depth, they're flashing it to the wings, they're
really
trusting
good,
guys
good
like
passers as well as good kickers, really good passers in the back line predominantly, so they should be confident and, as Noel says, brave enough to try and pull the trigger when they see that it's on there. Because again, speed wise, we're deciding daily or whatever, but Ireland aren't the quickest backliner in the world either. Nope. So they should be able
and they look slow on the turn. They look slow. They look
so
slow when teams get outside them.
You don't have to turn them by kicking all the time, although they've had good purchase with that attacking kicks in behind to turn the back three too. But being brave on the offensive side, and just a few more reps, a few more minutes, trusting like Marcus Smith, that they don't quite know what they have. They kind of do suspect what they have there as a generational 10 potentially, but a few more minutes and a few more reps, and he is a different style of player to what they've been used to having at 10 for a while. So that's kind of where the growing pains come from. But
he does have a good understanding of defence, and he does read defences very well. He just needs to get in sync with the men around him. That's been the biggest problem so far, is just communication and being in sync with his runners, because he does see what defences are leaving him, and there are a couple of times where he just goes without bringing someone with him, and then sometimes, to be fair,
as we highlighted the other day, Malins has been good at telegraphing or at reading what he's up to and trying to follow with him, and if Noel can do the same, and just it's not just Marcus, but the few guys playing around him being a bit more attuned to like a little twitch of the shoulder that tells you he's about to peel blind or something, and following him. We see that with Dombrandt for club footy with Quins, because that's just the way the offence works. But they'll just need to kind of embrace that a bit more in England colours in advance of this week and then the week after, to try and get purchase against these top level teams that they're going to be playing in crunch matches. They want to be able to produce really good moments of offensive footy and unpick those defences eventually.
And then the other thing from an offensive point of view is that it has been a little 1970s in terms of just once or twice, especially on the multi-phase, there hasn't been a sense that there's a proper pod and a proper screen option, and it was very 10, 12, 13 in terms of the way it lined up, and that obviously isn't going to fly against a good Irish defence. You do need someone cutting that hard line, be it Dombrandt or Simmons or whoever's in there. Itoji even can cut that line. You do need to give Smith that space to try and access the deep outside channels and just make Ireland respect you on the inside. They tend to do that anyway, and the space might be there on the outside, and that's on the guys in the pitch to read it. But you do need that inside option to sit down the Irish defence, and I wouldn't hate seeing guys coming off the shoulder of Smith on his inside, like when Noel running a line off him on the inside, just to check the Irish defence, keep them guessing, one or two setup plays before they really try and stretch them and get after Ringrose. And that's where you would want to see, it's kind of a horses for courses thing of who you put where you trust your inside runners, because you do need someone being the Tuilagi in the team, and Dombrandt's a natural choice, but you also need a ball playing forward out there to help your wingers, and I think maybe a Jamie George type or someone on the edge to sort of be a link man on the outside of Gary Ringrose's shoulder and try and find the winger out there is definitely something that they've been looking at already. Their forward pods, they've often had pods of 3 on the wing, which is pretty extreme, but that is probably what they're going to be trying to bring to the Irish defence. And just as you said at the start, if you can bring it from one wing to the other wing, Ireland can get disconnected. If you can do that in 2 phases, it does tend to rattle Ireland more than a forward hit-up does, because Ireland, that kind of settles them into the rhythm of defending a little more, and they can bring pressure then and hopefully force an error. But if you're stretching them from one side of the pitch to the other, then all of a sudden they're having to move, they look a little slower, they're a little slower off the line, and that's where guys like Marcus Smith can unpick them.
Absolutely. And then more proactively as well is where they're going to look to get after them at defensive time, because they actually have a lot of tape on how to punish Ireland and how to use a big meaty pack to do just that in the contact area, and that, like France did it, showed how to do it, but Eddie Jones's England have, with dynamism and power, got over the gain line with the ball, but also just smashed and upset the rhythm of the Irish offence to the point where they're kicking banal kicks towards Freddie Stewart, who gobbles them up as well. It's got to be a big performance from the whole 8, and then beyond that as well, the pack men or the men on the bench to come in and contribute physically, because they have a lot of really powerful forwards out there, and as much as they've been excited about getting involved in this new look offense, the nuts and bolts of it are things like Maro Itoje's breakdown and maul work that is spoiling that kind of thing from a defensive point of view, making Ireland's rhythmical offense just come unstuck and then be proactive in the breakdown enough that you can kind of somehow when the crowd gets involved in Twickenham like that, you can kind of make the Irish challenge shrink if you can get on top in that collision area.
No question. The collision area is interesting. It is a unique challenge. This is a different Irish offense even than the one that beat them last year, in Dublin. It's more evolved than that. It's all sort of run when Sexton's there, which we think he will be this week.
Sure.
It's running so seamlessly at the moment. We haven't really seen it come unstuck while Sexton's on the pitch. He's got a great read on the game. They're always going to start off with that pot of forwards, but what they're doing now that they weren't doing when England were smashing them back is adding just the layers of options and playing off one another in a way that wasn't happening before. And we haven't seen Sexton come unstuck yet, but I suspect the idea of targeting him and trying to hit him is probably not the best way. The best way is to try and get him to go into contact himself by kind of
depriving the options. It means staying connected outside of him such that he doesn't see a pass.
Yeah, exactly. With taking his first two good options away from him, his dump off short ball, just shutting that down, and then his secondary pass out the back, bringing pressure and shutting that down, and that might force him to tuck and go. And if you can even get him, it might look like a positive play where he comes in, but it's kind of a matador move where he can go down the middle, get stopped, and then all of a sudden the rhythm of the Irish offense isn't what it was. Sure. They're going to have to go to a forward hit up, and that's where your Itoje or Ewell's smash comes into play. All of a sudden they're backwards, and by the time Sexton's back, all we can kind of do is kick the ball. The other area you were talking about, Itoje as well, like the job he did on the Welsh line out last time, he's not going to get away, I don't think, with encroaching to that extent.
No, the Ireland line out is very good, but pressure it.
They love to launch off line out. Both of these teams so much love to launch off line out.
The last time Ireland were in Twickenham facing them, actually Itoje himself did an absolute number on James Ryan, so he did, and really made it tough and difficult for Ireland to launch off that particular set piece, which is their go-to. I think it's something like 60 plus and close to 70% of Ireland's scores over the professional era come from line-outs. It's a huge focus for both teams, so that is obviously just a tantalising matchup. And then similarly, scrum time, you're going to have to deal with some dynamic props in the Ireland camp. Obviously no Porter, but some very good scrummaging assets there, and you want to try and make it as combative as you can. They also kind of want to right the wrongs of last week at that particular set piece and be a bit more solid on their own pill as well, from an England point of view. But the set piece battle will be very, very close to decisive in this one, to be honest, because a lot of the time it does come back down to those basics.
It certainly will be if someone gets the edge. Like it might be the case that both sides are secure in their own ball. I think that's probably most likely. But if someone gets an edge, it will be massive. And if the most likely outcome there is Itoje to get on top of the Irish line out, which, because he's so good at it.
We've seen him do it before.
Yeah, no question. In terms of how the game plays out, like England, we talked about their offense. We know they should be confident. I still think from the middle third, in the way a lot of these sequences go, they'll have their plans to launch off lineouts. They will have one or two.
They'll have a cut here or there.
Yeah, they'll have one or two like little sequences that Eddie Jones designs that they want to be perfect, that hopefully will yield a try for them. But I think mostly you're going to be looking at them working the pendulum, kicking the ball deep, generating lineouts, and then trying to attack in the red zone. And hence the intrigue of this game, where it'll most likely play out, is when they're on the defensive side, and Ireland have pretty religiously been first port of call, trying to run the ball from just about everywhere inside their own kind of 60 metre range. They've been trying to work that offense. Sexton's been standing deep, running off his pod. He has wide options, he has short options, and they've pretty much gone through the phases very rhythmically and very well. And I think one of the things that England did so well against Wales last week time out was punish them for playing rugby in their own half. And that's going to be
isolate the runners, get over the ball,
and when Ireland are running all these support lines lines, if they can get a good tackle in, a good read in,
just takes one, and then the crowd are in, and then you're in, and then the ball's turned over.
They should all be dialed into having a poach first and foremost. Have a poach. Ireland are a little lax at the moment on their breakdown work,
and you saw with France, like even if the poach doesn't come good, it still upsets the rhythm, because like that what they did in week 1, Ireland was managed to create like 2-second rucks and 1.5-second rucks for Gibson Park, and it was gone before it was even there, and there was no contest, and there was no chance for the Welsh defenders. Whereas France,
and that was all November as well.
Whereas France, with just physicality in the contact, which is something you'd associate with English forwards and English play in general as well, and then just combative instincts at the breakdown, make it a mess, get involved in there, and just make sure that it's nothing clean coming out to the Irish halfback, and then that's the step one towards just upsetting the rhythm, such that you create that doubt in Irish heads that forces the box kicking game to come back out, and then suddenly you're a bit more comfortable there. Freddie Stewart's great at diffusing those bombs, and you're kind of forcing Ireland to be a bit more reactive than proactive, and away from home that could be enough.
If the Irish offense isn't able to function from the midfield, they're going to be a problem, and that comes from the breakdown pressure. So it's a big day for the likes of Itoje, Curry, Dombrandt, Barbieri if he's out there, that's his specialty as well.
George if he wants to have a cut.
Yeah, he's more a Cowan-Dickey role. There is no Cowan-Dickey this week, but nevertheless, I think that's going to be an area that England are definitely going to have to focus on.
Sure, for sure. And then on the flip side, from the green lens, Ireland have a lot to do, because as much as in some people's eyes they're the more form side coming into this one or whatever, it's still Twickenham, and it's very, very tough to not make England favourites in Twickenham from an Irish point of view. This is their second, from the macro lens, it's their second of their big 5 away tests in this calendar year, and none of them come easy. They failed test 1, but only just gave a right good game in France, but did just fall short in Paris, and now they have London and Twickenham to try and deal with, and it's a tough old ask.
It's a tough old ask. You said at the beginning of the year they could easily go 0-5 without playing badly, and that is very much the equation here. A lot of people are giving them a good chance. Some of the bookies have them favourites. Wins in Twickenham are few and far between.
Wins in Twickenham. It's tough to make anyone but England favourites in Twickenham when 2 rugby teams take the field there. But
very tough indeed. Ian Henderson, from a squad point of view, is back in the squad. As you pointed out, Porter gone, unfortunately, out for the tournament. So Jeremy Loughman comes in. He's unlikely to feature. You're probably looking at Cian Healy at loose head, with Kilcoyne coming in behind him, and then Tadhg Furlong and Beelum on the other side.
Likely,
with Sheehan and Herring then in the middle. That all-star front row, unfortunately, has gone by the wayside a little bit.
2 out of 3 gone down, but that is to be expected when you're running a lot through your forwards and stuff, and it is a test of the depth in behind.
You guys will have the teams by the time that this video comes out, so I won't belabour the point, but it will be interesting to see how they work the options they have at lock, whether they go with Henderson, Ryan, and how they fit Tadhg Byrne into that equation. Do they drop one of them? Does Byrne come in at 6 in place of Doris maybe? And then you got Josh.
They do like Doris at the
Coleman.
fulcrum of those pendulums. He is a good pivot man in that pod, but
he's not had a great, he's been okay, but he's not had a great Six Nations. Doris, his hands are kind of letting him down sometimes. He's had a few cold drops in big moments.
Well, they do use him as a first receiver a lot of the time though, so I don't know what their option is. The question mark around Byrne is at scrum time, to be honest, and they didn't see anything from the other locks in behind last week because we didn't have contested scrums, but the France game was a concern when you have the ballast like that, and England present a similar challenge in terms of just the engine room and the heft in there. So it'll be interesting to see what they go with, but it's pretty settled by and large, and they do have great options in the back row to rotate in, and there's kind of a back row by committee aspect to it as well.
I feel like Josh and Conan are dead certs.
I think so,
jerseys, and the locks.
And O'Mahony probably on the bench as well. So lots of good experience. A bit of a dilemma at 12 as well. Henshaw hadn't really hit the ground running coming back from injury, whereas Aki looks very good.
I'd be surprised if they didn't go Aki.
I think Ringrose is probably safe, given that Hume actually did struggle a bit despite some good club form this year. He did struggle a bit in the Italy game, I should say. So they've got kind of quite a settled team. We kind of know what to expect from Ireland. It's just a matter of whether we see them arrive to the pitch in Twickenham or not.
That's it. The back three as well is interesting. I'm curious to see who they go for with Hugo Keenan. There's so many good wings in form.
They do.
Go Noah Hansen, Balakoon, Conway.
Larmer was going well in club footy as well.
Unfortunately been ruled out.
He's
injured.
managed to pick up a knock. But there's good options out there. I think Hugo Keenan we will obviously see. I suspect we will see Lowe as well, if for no other reason than the big left boot against that English kicking game that they know will be quite formidable. It's quite an asset, and I don't think they'll ignore it. But yeah, the Irish team does have quite a lot of quality to delve from, a good amount of depth, and as we've been highlighting, a very sophisticated offensive system now that involves the ball playing skills of all of their forwards, which is a point of difference and always has been. Kind of gets these proactive players, guys like Tadhg Furlong, in at the first receiver pivot point, granting a lot more space and time for Sexton, who's out the back, and then normally another pod behind, and just it's a matter of choosing the right options and squaring the shoulders. They were a little lateral at times in the Italy game. They were also kind of sometimes found wanting running off Joey Carberry in France a little bit. They got the timing of those runs a bit wrong.
It was all not quite right without Sexton, unfortunately. But Sexton, for what it's worth, reads the game so well these days. True. Like it's the little micro reads that he gets on a defense, the set before he gets the ball, where he just knows whether or not to go outside a little bit, whether he knows that the option is for the first pod to keep the ball, try and pressure them that way, or if he does get the ball, am I running a little wide here and then square? Am I trying to find the edge? Are the defence a little narrow, or are they a little stretched? In which case I'm straightening and finding my short runner to kind of open them up a little, not open them up entirely, but just stretch them a little more, pressure them. He just, his option taking, and he runs the lines to suit the options that he reads, the play before the phase starts, if that makes sense. Like his read on that is so perfect these days. That's what Ireland are going to have to bring, and that's what you want to see them bring. This Irish team has been all about going through brilliant, quick, dynamic phases with all kinds of options.
Like they're doing it quickly, clearing rooks in 2 and 3 seconds, but going through 10 to 15 phases before breaking you down, which is like a very bewildering array of offense to have to deal with from a defensive point. And that is the kind of, they want to try and overload English defenders with those options, is exactly what they want to do. Present Tadhg Furlong the ball, go forward ball from quick things, and have options either side, because you have to respect the heft of that carry.
And then all of a sudden English defenders are kind of at best off balance and one-on-one against a guy like Jack Conan, and then if he does win that contact, he does have an option to give it to a Tadhg Byrne or something along those lines. And we've seen the Irish offence work in that way to rumble over the gain line, and Gibson Park drives a great tempo. Sexton's calling great plays, picking great options. The guys are picking sharp lines, and it does look irresistible. And we haven't yet seen that unstuck with Sexton at the helm at quarterback.
That's true. Obviously,
that's really they're making their hope on it.
Going to look to try and run at England in Twickenham, which is going to be a new look. Try and not present a slow, laboured box kicking territory kind of struggle, which they have done the last few times in Twickenham to limited success. Try and back the barnstorming offense. Correct to point out that offensive breakdown has to be managed. There are English monsters who will be targeting it, and France got some good purchase there by just winning contacts and then stymieing it. You want to see Gibson Park getting front foot ball, getting clean ball to be able to whip around. So a lot of that is on the accuracy of the clean out, because sometimes they're running these optimistic lines and it just involves a little bit of extra work to kind of backpedal and get into a ruck and resource it. But the first man there does need to stick his clean out pretty much all the time when you're doing it that way, when you're going through as many phases as Ireland like to. So that is a priority, would be kind of tidying up that offensive breakdown, because it has been a little loose both in the Italy game and in the France game.
And not just the offensive breakdown, like the what you're talking about as well. Like it's a fabulous thing to watch Ireland play with such verve and such vigour and such brilliance on the offensive ball, moving it from everywhere. It does require like a lot of accuracy, like almost more than Joe Schmidt was so intent from an accuracy point of view on not making mistakes. But actually in these big games, making mistakes can be criminal. The difference between a pass from Gibson Park that goes over Furlong's left ear, or a tip-on pass that's dropped, or just a quality of carry, a mistimed run off someone, that can be the difference between getting smashed by Tom Curry or actually breaking through the line and getting an offload away. Like the accuracy of everything that Ireland are doing, they've been brilliant, really brilliant now in the last 6 months to a year nearly. They've been near enough flawless, but they're coming into this game probably on as little momentum as they've had in that time, and just given the sort of damp squib nature of that Italy game and the 13 men, that was the only headline from it, and they can't even have felt good about what happened after that.
They all looked a little weird on the pitch about it. It didn't feel right, and it kind of washed over the team, and it just kind of, the game then passed everyone by without too many learnings to take from it.
Exactly. So it'll be a good strength of, first of all, just how how high the ceiling is for this offense in terms of operating away from home against a really good physical English defense, and secondly the mental resilience of this team and these players to try and execute really high level physical skillful quick rugby
in a cauldron like that.
In a cauldron like that is exactly right. Yeah, that is a real test. I think it's down to the quality more than even I think I would trust Sexton to read and execute really well. But this whole offense falls apart without the brilliant dynamism of the loose forwards and tight forwards as well.
Yeah.
Can they deliver that? No Andrew Porter, Cian Healy in. That's the big question for me.
It is. No, it's a massive question. And yeah, it starts with like fundamental things like set piece, which is O'Connell's been hammering that in the press conference as well. They want to be more accurate than they have been on their own line out pill, want to be a bit more proactive on the scrummaging side as well, and just be secure on their own ball and cause a bit of discomfort on the English ball, particularly at line out time as well. That's going to be a fiercely competitive area and one of the focal points for Ireland, because they do love launching off that particular set piece. And sure, in the game last year in against England, one of the decisive blows was struck from just a strike play directly off line out. That was a really clever design at the back of the line out to put Keith Earls through a bit of space, and those kinds of tries are real ins for Ireland, particularly away from home. If you can grab good design, trust your set piece, run a nice design play and grab a very cheap score. That's a key part of winning away from home, is being able to just execute like that and grab 5 or 7 very quickly.
One of the last times Ireland won in Twickenham, they had a couple of set piece scores off line out. So you look at 2018, CJ Standard through the middle. You look at 2010, Tommy Bowe.
They normally try to keep something in their locker for this exact fixture. So I'm excited to see what that is, because O'Connell offers a lot of good cerebral thinking. And then you have Itoje on the other side. Obviously Itoje watch is a big problem for that. If you want to secure your own set piece, you got to deal with the Itoje factor that England are bringing, so that could be a massive matchup. And then similarly then on the defence, it's a bit of a task. You know, you have a young England side that's going to be quite a different look from all the tape that they've had on England thus far. You new young 10, you want to pressure him, probably trusting Josh van der Fleer within the system to probably lead that offensive blitz on the inside, but then the outside is where you want to shut it down.
Do you hold the same shape that you've been holding on the defence? Do you trust it? It for me is still the biggest question mark in this Irish team, is just the not the integrity of the defensive capabilities of the individuals involved, but the system that is very, very narrow and often isolates their wingers, who pretty much to a man are not like great defenders.
Yeah, and
there isn't a great defender
as we've
among
highlighted
them,
and we're acutely aware of. Like, they're all quick wingers and they're all very dangerous in open space, but they're not the quickest in world rugby. Like, certainly if they're playing the Springboks, which they are in the World Cup, like the wingers are quicker than our wingers. So if we have a system that isolates wingers 1v1, not a great matchup, and England is similar in that regard.
Exactly. England will be looking to get to that edge. They have their explosive forward pods out there. I'm curious to see whether Ireland adjust and whether they play with a bit more width, and they focus a little more on keeping with and trusting their inside defence to function without that. Like without that necessarily bunching of the area around the ruck, just trusting them one-on-one to stick tackles and contain England like Wales did.
I don't know if that's what we'll see. I think they will probably stick to a similar system, if for no other reason than I think the reverse drift and the kind of thing doesn't work well in the psyche, and has led to some of our worst defensive showings over the last few decades, in terms of it is more connected, but we tend to not be proactive then on defense in any capacity and just soak a lot of meters on the edge for no good reason. Whereas at least when you're proactive, it is a gung-ho kind of all or nothing, similar to what the Springboks do in terms of the shoot. You're back in the read and the stick ability of Gary Ringrose, but then also outside him having Lowe or whoever on the wing follow him up and make good kind of ball and all tackles to shut down that outside proactively.
And I do like the idea of bringing line speed.
They do,
Smith.
It dials in an aggressive mindset to defending that. Yeah, sure, sometimes you get unpicked if you do get it wrong, but by and large it means that you are bringing speed off the line, trying to engage them in the contact on your own terms.
Yeah, and Josh van der Fleer against Smith, I don't know how awful we'll see it. Obviously, it's hard to stay connected entirely from a defensive point of view when you've got a guy like Smith who roams either side of the ruck. Like, Josh isn't going to be on him all the time, but if they can set him on Smith and kind of force him to give the ball away quickly and just not be comfortable holding the ball for large periods. Like Smith is definitely one who likes to hold the ball for a second, and he's probably done a little too much in this tournament where he's not coming onto the ball with enough pace and he's kind of stopping and assessing and then trying to move off a guy. Josh is probably a defender who's very well capable of shutting that down. He just gets up, gets in your face. You do not have time to think
and then
or to
maybe
jink.
he ships it on, and then it's not in Smith's hands anymore, it's in someone else, and that's step one for the defence. You want to try and pressure and unsettle that young lad, and pressure the other halfback in Randall as well. Like try and make that young halfback combination doubt themselves, and then you can kind of get on top and edge things in the defensive end. And then similarly, the kicking game, always pivotal in this one, trusting that back three pendulum to kind of diffuse the very good variety of attacking kicks that England will probably present them with.
It's been the most consistently painful picture Eddie Jones has wrought upon Ireland, as little grubbers. Once they get to the edge, once they get to that outside, if Gary Ringrose's shoot doesn't shut them down, very often the next thing that happens, be it on this phase or the following phase, is the pendulum is upset, the wingers have come up, and we're going to just dump a little kick in behind, and all of a sudden Ireland find it very tough to deal with.
And then that pace, and then that race is on, and it does look very helter-skelter and tough to deal with.
Was it the last time in Twickenham that Sexton had that bad one where the ball set up and he dropped it, and it was a try?
Like those kinds of chaos plays are you want to just limit them by being kind of accurate.
Deal with it.
You do also
just have to deal with those balls when they come.
Big job for Hugo and the rest of the back three to just be alive to that danger and to bring their own kicking boots with them as well, because obviously that middle third kicking duel will decide a lot about who gets to be proactive in this game, and there'll be both sides will get their purple patches, and Ireland need to be clinical with theirs, but being aware of that kicking threat and being alive to the danger, and then being accurate enough to defuse it and get on with their own game.
And that's it. Now that's where the long left boot of Lowe, like you'd imagine Lowe is in this team because of his long left boot, and that has to become a factor. They have to have a mind to what Wales did to the English offence by just
field and
kicking
kick long.
Exactly. Just go for as much as you can get out of that ball if you have the space and time to do so, rather than seeking touch. The thing is, Ireland, from a defensive point of view, they can get a bit raggedy when the play stays alive, and it's not something you'd recommend they do against a team like France. But when England are so reliant on their own line-out ball, Ireland should consider just hammering the ball deep, exiting as best they can, forcing England to kick back to you, and then edging that battle. And then once they get the ball up and around that midfield, they're going to trust their own offence to run and to rumble and to control the game in that way. And if they can be the side that holds onto the ball in the middle of the field and does so with success, then they could be in a position where they control the game away from home.
Absolutely. And with all that said, how do you see it going? What do you think?
I'm always blur visioned when
the green lens descends.
I don't know. It's tough to say definitively one way or the other.
It's very much that. I will definitively say, come on Ireland, and I think we're going to get the dub and roll on to next week with an away win under our belt. That'd be my ideal scenario, but I think it's going to be a one-score game either way. I think we're in for a tight, kind of very physical battle that'll be decided by a couple of moments of quality on either side, but I think it'll be no holds barred anyway, in a very intense atmosphere in Twickenham, and I think Ireland will arrive to play, so I'm hopeful that we can just get the result. It's
a bold statement, but I'm going to go with you on this one. Obviously my lens is totally clouded, so I think it's rational, but God, I don't know.
We try and be as unbiased as we can, but we don't in the Irish circles, because it's
tough. I mean, exactly, but I do trust what Sexton has brought to this Irish offence. I do think even the fact that they adjusted so well against France, obviously what they can't afford is to get blown away by England.
The first quarter is
the
so
same
important.
Way they did against France. I mean, that's what could happen
to the pitch.
That's what could happen. Yeah, exactly. So they have to be there. They have to be physical from the off. But if they are, and they do generate that kind of game, I do think that they will unseat the English defence. I do think that Elliot Daly will be overloaded by what Sexton and that offence are bringing.
Probably not shutting it down quite as effectively as Gael Fickou was.
Yeah, exactly. And I do back them to open up England and find a couple of key tries and find themselves down in the right areas of the field more often than not from that midfield offensive set. So I love what we're doing on offence. I love the Irish attack, so I'm going to trust it to get the win in Twickenham and bring it to the last weekend.
Yes, that's what we got, because we're green-eyed people in this regard. Whenever this clash rolls around, how can we, it's tough to make anyone other than England favourites in Twickenham, but they're not my favourites in Twickenham. But that's who we got. Who do you got in this awesome climactic match?
Thank you for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please be sure to like and share with your friends. And if you'd like to hear more of what we have to say, please be sure to subscribe and click that bell so you get notified when we upload our videos. And please join the comment section as well. We like to get a fun conversation going here.